was H.
Yeah.
Remember? H meant honors.
Yeah.
And I only had one H in my whole elementary school life. And I don't even know what it was for, anyways. Was nog ba nog tayo na kukunit na to kaks. Dis dat ek het otas klimaat en ek sê hy doen nie op is wat se tog koekie, wat se tog kuina nie op. Net so is a pool cat do. We used to get checks made to us that we completed a grade or something, and we get, I think it was $5 or something. Yeah. But and that check was about this long, all handwritten. You get a $5, I guess you could say, incentive. Kind of doubled our treating money.
You know, when we were growing up, we had, I don't know, it was towards the end of the school year, they would have idogskats. We had track and field. You guys had to witness this. Track and field was a big thing back then. I mean, it was huge.
Mm-hmm.
Like they talk about it today, but it's a kind of passion. But when you kind of just say, Kika, tell us about it. You know, track and field day at Oakson back then, it was a big thing back then. I mean, they had, like today they have stores and they sell them, you know, pop and chips and whatnot. Well, we had them back then. There was an old building just on the bottom, on the east side.
Concession. Oh,
yeah. So there was.
That's what they used to call it.
Yeah, and you know that the track was on the bottom. Down see me the trees at the road. When you pass Ocean, it's still there. The track there, but on top was like a little. It kind of overlooks. In the back were all the what that big is occupistaya. Oh yeah. Occupistaya there. I don't know, you would see a dozen or more of team horses. And but people would bring their own lunches with them because it was an all day affair. And they would that's something track and field. So but over time it just kind of diminished and went away. The people did come. That was track and field. I remember the red ribbons were first place, the blue ribbons were second place, and the yellow ribbons were third place. And if you didn't get red, blue, or yellow, then you would get a ribbon. Sometimes at the end it was called participation.
I didn't say you had Skype them. That's a pakoma. Too slow. So just end up with a bunch of white ribbons.
I think they were. So if you do,
it was white.
So it didn't matter if you came in last, you still got a ribbon. But it was fun, you know. It was, but at that time it showcased. I remember there was a guy by the name of Roland Greenbear. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah, I remember Roland.
Oh, that guy. I mean, I'm pretty sure he would have been in the Olympics. Boy, we would sit there, all of us, and just watch him on those long jumps. Oh man, he just went, yeah. There was, I mean, we could name
Oh, there were a lot of
Oh, a
athletes.
lot of them. We'll forget all of them.
And then Randy Engman.
Oh, yeah.
Randy Engman. He
Yeah.
won that Tom Longboat Trophy.
Yeah, yeah.
To recognize the top Indian athlete in Canada.
Oh,
And he won that through track and field.
yeah,
So that was yung kataktayan ako anak nam Randy.
yeah.
Dapat eksklimatok siya.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the track and field, what were the things that made us fast, made us strong by the time we got to residential school? It was those things kaksin no nixie, and our parents would use us when we go hunting. And there were many things that we had to do physically. I mean, we had to go get wood for the winter time, and we had to run, especially when we were when we were hunting.
Mhm.
So we had to do some. By the time we got to school, so it's normal for us to compete.
Yeah. And all the things that we had to do around, with the horses and cows and
Yeah.
haying and in those days, now they have all these labor-saving haying devices, but in those days it was all done by hand.
Yeah.
With loading hay and stacking it and hauling water. We didn't have running water. We had to pump water.
Yeah.
And so that in itself is pretty good exercise when you have to pump water and fill a trough, or things such as moving coal.
Yeah.
Because we used to get coal, but they were in really big chunks, and then we'd have to break them up, and it's like breaking rocks with a sledgehammer with an axe, the flat side of the axe, by the way. And so that was we always had some physical labor. So when we went to school, these kind of activities that promoted running, lifting, and jumping, and so forth, that I would say those are the things that we came to excel at for certain sports.
Yeah.
Like when the kidote Eskimoki, it schools, it up school makes a asikutuis.
Yeah.
It doesn't say kasupani meet there.
Yeah.
So in those days, they would send the younger ones to flush out the deer towards where the hunters are going to be.
Yeah.
So we were kind of used as dogs to herd and flush out the deer, so that the hunters would be ready. There would always be a place there where they would drive the deer towards, and then the hunters can take their pick from there.
And you know what's going to when there was something like a copy, like an emergency, and then our parents or somebody older in the family could done it, and they would tell us, "You're fast. You run fast. Run over there." And for us, the nearest place that had the phone was Ocean School. So we would run real fast to Ocean School and knock on the priest's door, tell them there was an emergency at somebody's house. So those kind of things we brought those into school, and we're very competitive. Somebody that we heard was a lot quicker, a lot faster, a lot stronger, and so we would compete. And going back to those days at Ocean Track, the people would just sit. There's no chairs, what they call today powwow chairs. They didn't have powwow chairs back then. They had They had sea guns, they had blankets, and people would sit, families would sit there, and they would look at the competition. It was good. It was a lot of fun. I remember that, and it was good to see our families watching us and participating at those track and field days. And the other thing that I remember too was doon at the skate up to school when they played football. Second season piano football.
Pukunako.
Yeah, so there was lots of people at those football games. I remember that. And all of them had. I remembered my cousins. They're way older than me. They're all gone, pretty well, all of them. But they had their helmets, their shoulder pads, their pants, everything, even their cleats, everything. Back then, football was huge.
Yeah.
And then after, it just kind of died. By the time I went to residential school, there was no football.
Nina, usa doutu pissa usa pukunako mo usa nida pinkadu usa soccer.
Yeah.
That was a big thing for them.
Yeah.
Because of the residential school, the supervisors, a lot of them are from the British background, military, and soccer was a big game at that time.
Back then.
So they were quite proficient in soccer.
Yeah.
So these things would change over the years, and then finally hockey and the outdoor.
Oh yeah. And
outdoor rink at Old Sun.
yeah.
And that was usually a big thing for everybody.
So today, we talk about hockey all the time, but football was just as huge back then. Well, probably even bigger back then. And it was huge, track and field, football, and then, but I can't remember baseball.
Not so much. Scott got baseball. Some people did play it, but I think it was just never really caught on.
It just never took off.
I know the only time I started playing baseball was when I got integrated into the white school, Carsland.
Yeah.
And then we got into baseball over there. So that was the one thing that we picked up when we went to the white schools. And they didn't play that much football there.
No.
But of course there's hockey.
Oh yeah.
But then there's also curling.
Oh yeah.
That was another new thing for us.
That was huge back then. It was. Curling was huge. Of course, hockey was just huge. I played a lot. You played a lot of hockey.
Yes, the wrestling. That was never really beats. Boxing.
Yeah.
Those were sort of like indoor sports, and but sometimes when people get kind of carried away. What's the sometimes people would take offense to being punched by somebody else, and then it would turn into a real brawl.
Yeah.
Didn't have any rules anymore.
Yeah.
And then there was one game we played at, said we were talking about football. Pukadan was it? Akukats.
Oh yeah.
At now they call it Sundance or Okanwa, whatever you want to call it, the camp, the annual big camp. There was usually somebody that had a football, and we would go off on the outskirts of the camp and set up 2 poles, and those were the goal lines.
Yeah. And
you just divided up the team into even number.
Yeah.
And somebody would just kick the football in the air, and you just grab it, you run with it, you throw it, you tackle anybody with it. But as long as the ball made it over that goal line, then you got a score.
Yeah.
And there would be so many of us. Sometimes there'd be easily at least about 50 of us
Yeah.
playing at the same time. So
Yeah.
you just see all these, it's stupid,
Yeah.
just see all this dust being raised and
Yeah.
people, and one of the things that was frowned on was to get mad at other people. You were actually told to sit out if you got mad if somebody tackled you or tripped you, but it was like a no holds barred game. As long as you got that ball across that goal line. So that was one game that we played a lot at the Sundance.
Yeah.
So there's always something. That's why I think football always remained as a pretty big draw for us. So
The other thing is that, you know, wrestling was there,
mhm.
boxing was there, and you mentioned curling was there, hockey came along, and by the time residential school ended, those things just kind of grew on their own.
Mm.
The other thing that was there all the time was rodeos. Huh?
Mm.
Oh, they had rodeos, big rodeos.
Mhm.
And,
We even had rodeos at residential school without any animals.
Yeah,
You see, the big boys would act like horses and
Yeah.
bulls, or they would even kick you and run over you if you fell off. So, so always the little guys that got the beatings.
and you know the boys would make those. Then you got those barrels.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they had two of them one year because so many of us we said we would ride the bareback, the bull riding, saddle from, and so they had to make two of those, so so everybody can ride.
I guess some of what sticking in mind. They would break their own ropes.
Oh yeah.
For those things, and so it was never. We had to buy the stuff,
Oh,
and then some people would make those cans and put a rock in there. Somehow tie that rock in there onto that can so it would make that noise like the bull riders. And there's some pretty crafty people. Especially the older boys. They really put a lot of effort into making it as real as possible. That's so boy it's stupid.
And you know the difference between Crowfoot and Osun was basketball. Basketball, for whatever reason back then, it was big in Crowfoot, but very, very little in Osun. It had to do with the priests and the supervisors. Whatever they brought to the schools, and they would give us it. So it just so happened that down here, they had a guy that I suppose brought in basketball. So there's a lot of basketball.
Oh yeah, and they had a good gym for it too.
Oh yeah, that's what they did.
At the old Sun, we always had that barn.
Yeah.
And that little Quonset, which was never really a basketball size court. The other thing was, not as you mentioned basketball, we had gymnastics.
Oh yeah.
Where you do all these tumbles and rolls and whatever, and so there were things that kind of, I think in a lot of ways it wasn't the supervisor would introduce those, but then it was the older boys that would supervise them.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing was a movie night. Where we go see a movie. Sometimes it would be like a Tarzan movie, let's say, just use that for an example.
Yeah.
And so after that movie, for the rest of the week or a couple weeks, that's all we played. Was Tarzan. And if it was And if it was a cowboy movie, then we were cowboys for the
Cowboys and Indians.
Then we were cowboys and Indians for the next week or two. Anytime we went out to play, we'd replay that movie. And then some of them wasn't so near. And then some of the people get shot, they didn't want to die. So that created a lot of, I guess you could say, conflict. He's a states guy. Tenminste wat ze doen, kijk toch jungle movies. En ik zie wat ze daar zich aanpikken. Wat ze nou met dat boekjes te doen. Then there were those movies about the jungle, and of course in those movies they were kind of racist. The black people would always be beaten upon and do all the work, and some of us, some of the boys had to be relegated to being the black guys, and they would do all the work and everything as part of the play thing. So depending on what movie, and then sometimes we seen a movie about the knights.
Oh, yeah.
The Knights of the Round Table or something like that, and pretty soon everybody was making swords. So that was always was our inspiration. Kept us busy.
If Tarzan came on, we were Tarzan.
Everybody wanted to be Tarzan. Nobody wanted to be Jane or Cheetah. Those were kind of like the main character. And of course the black people they would go around carrying everything and be whipped and everything.
Yeah.
But that's what they saw in the movie, so they would kind of replay all of that.
And one time Old Yeller was on, so everybody wanted to get a dog.
Everybody wanted to get a golden Labrador. And some people would even make up stories that they had a dog like that. And then there was Wild West shootouts, you know.
Oh yeah.
Oh gee, sometimes sometimes we get the wrong directions, and some of us who were supposed to die, we wouldn't die. And the big boys would get mad at us because we're supposed to. Of course, we're expendable.
Yeah.
You died, you stay dead.
So, what we're talking about today is what helped us get through, for lack of a better word, the challenges that we faced in residential school. And we found humor in things that we learned before we went to residential school. So that just kind of helped us. Those were the values that brought us through. And unfortunately, you know, we lost a lot of our friends through alcohol and so forth. And that was the sad thing. I remembered a lot of the boys that I went to school with, students, you know, and but there were those that used those values. What our dads, our Gosson, those things it's just sit up here. They brought us through residential school. And so when people say, what were the good things that you learned at residential school? Well, I would probably say there was very little, next to nothing, because we already learned the good things in residential school. Before we got to residential school, I mean.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
There was, and also some of the things that we were able to withstand and put up with, like the cold when we're trying to play hockey, and the climate, the different conditions, really hot outside, but we'd be still playing out there simply because it was we had to be outside. And so we managed to work on, deal with those kind of conditions.
Yeah,
So it made us, I think the other thing is made us very creative
yeah,
in ways of, I guess you could say, now we set up plays so that we would enjoy it, because sometimes that was the only reprieve we had from all that other stuff that was happening at the school regarding getting strapped and being punished for this, being punished for that. So it was always a challenge, and we rose to these challenges. It got us to
yeah,
we became very courageous, brave, to be able to withstand those kind of issues. But there were some that broke, and they just had no outlet for it other than to, when they left the school, they turned to addiction and so forth, or got in trouble with the law as a way of I guess you would call it fighting back.
yeah,
Especially regarding authority, because that's all we got in residential school was the authority was were the our supervisors and the teachers and so forth. The other interesting thing that a lot of people don't realize, maybe, and you might have seen some pictures of residential school, but we all dressed the same at different groups. The junior boys, the intermediate boys, senior boys, we all had different sets of clothing, and so that never changed. Coveralls. We used to just wear coveralls instead of clothes. We just have our underclothes on. A lot of times it was a full-length underwear year round. And then you just wore those coveralls.
The only difference with those clothes was our numbers.
We had numbers to the whole bit.
Yeah.
And then we'd kind of, like with the Anglican, Protestant, whatever you want to call it, old Sunday school, they were really big on evenings and morning service.
Yeah.
So we'd have to get dressed up in these really itchy little suit coats. Don't know, for some reason those little suit jackets were really itchy. Maybe it was the cheapest material they could find for a suit coat, but we'd have to get dressed up in that in order to be presentable in church. So it was quite the ordeal sitting through church, trying not to scratch.
I remember my number was number 17 one year.
So everything was numbered.
When they look at the pants, say number 17. That's
no more name, just 17.
Oh, but those are memories that we learned. We're all the same. In chapel time, we all had the same bow tie.
Oh yes, yeah.
We had the suit jacket. It was all the same color. And the boys would say, suit, but no money.
And then some of the older boys would go to cadets.
Oh yeah.
In town, they would go and they would get dressed up in their little army uniforms, and they go to town and come back, and just before supper, they come marching in. And then one time they came marching in, and somebody yelled out, "Canada's last hope." The cadets got really mad to me, took offense to that. But we had, there were sort of like little army guys that would go into town and come back and be all spiffed up in their uniform.
Yeah.
So cadets was another big thing for the older boys. And,
it was good for them. And the other thing is that brought us through was the word in English. And then we would try to know what the supervisor, the teacher was saying. For instance, the word understand. And so we would try to say and think, what's he saying or she saying? and it one of
Standing under something.
Huh? Then I was more confused.
And also, in those days, we all spoke Blackfoot, but we couldn't talk it in school because it was frowned upon. We got punished for it. But when we started learning English, we would say English words and we would just laugh because it sounded so funny, the English language, which is kind of sad nowadays because now these young people are trying to speak Blackfoot, and we say something in Blackfoot, they find that really funny. So things have kind of turned around. So we were making fun of English. We're having fun with English.
Because when somebody has cramps, and we say "awa pussy," and when you look at the word "awa pussy," it's when you touch something like
shock,
electric
shock.
Electric shock. Huh? So we're trying to figure out. The other day was telling us down at the arbor. She said that she told the supervisor she's having electricity in her leg.
The other word is with the leg, it's leg bases are having a pain in their leg.
Yeah.
Somebody was saying, it's fun suecho. And that word in Blackfoot is also related to somebody who's pregnant, who's having pain. So this guy was having the hospital. And these are stories that have been passed down. And this guy was in the hospital and he had his having a pain in his leg. So he told his buddy there, could you tell that nurse to give me something? I had a pain in my leg. He was saying he had a pain in his leg all day. And the guy, his buddy was translating for him. So he told the nurse, my friend, his leg was having a baby all night. How would the nurse understand the guy's legs having a baby all night?
No. So it's just simply to say we didn't know English, and so we had to learn in our own way.
Well, even now you can't even speak English properly. You always use the wrong words.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't even pronounce them properly.
But anyways, we're done today.
I don't know. Let me check. See, sometimes they cut us off because we're get too nutty here. Okay, so I've got that. You do nyokska. Then the kaku. You do mopo.
Go.
I couldn't wait that. So we'll just have to now we're gonna have to quit, otherwise we might get carried
I
away.
want to keep going.
Yeah.
Like last week or 2 weeks ago, we spoke full Blackfoot all the way. I don't know if you guys saw it. We spoke full Blackfoot for almost an hour. I only spoke one English word, and that was at the end when I said bye-bye.
2 words. So the next time we get together, we're just going to speak English. It's not even a challenge. So maybe the next time we get together, we can talk about. I think one of the things that is some of the things that we want to tell our children.
Yeah.
We'll speak from the heart, and I'll talk to my children and mine. And in our language, our nieces and nephews, those are all our children. So I have a lot of children, and I want to say something to them. and it'll give us I guess it's a way of looking back and looking at where we are now. And for some people, they're still struggling with that as to what they should be telling their children.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is really, there's a lot of embarrassment about what happened. And really they had no choice. So they were taken advantage of in a lot of ways. And these are some of the things that I'd like to, let's just say, well, next time we will talk to our children, which means all of you out there, all the young people too. Because as leadership, Vincent being a previous chief, and in our way of honoring that, we still call him a chief. And I've been a band counselor, and so we've been put in that position where we took all of Siksika as our children, and we were put in that, given the honor of looking after all our children. So I think it's only appropriate we can talk to everybody as our children, and maybe give you some challenges. I know the first one is going to be our language. That's going to be probably the biggest challenge you're going to work with, but there's some other things that we're going to have you take a look at. How's that sound?
Good.
Okay. Ken?
Ken?
Tack i much.